The morning sunlight stretched across the wooden floor, warming Buster's golden fur. For 10 years this was his signal. He opened his eyes, but a familiar, dull pain in his hips made him hesitate. He was a Labrador retriever, and for a decade he had been the eyes of his human David. Buster took a deep breath, fighting the stiffness in his joints, and slowly pushed himself up. The house was quiet, but he could hear the faint sound of David brushing his teeth in the bathroom. It was time to work. Buster shook his head, his ears flapping loudly. He walked down the hallway, his claws clicking on the floor. His destination was the metal hook by the front door. That was where his leather harness hung, the symbol of his duty, his pride, and his entire identity. When he wore the harness, he was not just a dog, he was a protector. However, as Buster reached the hallway, he stopped. Something was wrong. There was an unfamiliar scent in the air. It was sweet, wild, and incredibly annoying. Suddenly, a furry blur crashed into Buster's side, making him lose his balance. It was the puppy. His name was Max, a golden retriever with huge paws and far too much energy. He had arrived 3 days ago, and Buster still did not understand why. Buster gave a low, warning growl, telling the young dog to back off. Max backed away, wagging his tail happily, completely unaware of the serious situation. The door to the bathroom opened, and David walked out, holding his white cane. Buster immediately moved toward him, gently pressing his nose against David's hand. This was their morning greeting. David smiled and rubbed behind Buster's ears. "Good morning, my old friend," he whispered. Buster felt a wave of pride. He turned towards the hook and sat down, waiting for the heavy leather harness to be placed over his head. He ignored the pain in his back legs. He was ready for the city streets, the loud traffic, and the busy sidewalks. He knew exactly how to keep David safe, but David did not reach for Buster's harness. Instead, he reached higher up the wall and took down a brand new stiff vest. Buster stared at it. It smelled like plastic and fresh leather, not like sweat and hard work. "Come here, Max," David called out. Buster watched in absolute shock as the silly, energetic puppy ran forward. David knelt down and carefully secured the new vest around Max's chest. The puppy chewed playfully on the strap until David gently corrected him. Buster's heart sank. He stepped forward and nudged David's knee, trying to remind his human that he was making a terrible mistake. "I am your guide," Buster thought. "I know the routes. I know when the cars turn too fast." David sighed, a sound full of sadness and affection. "No, Buster," he said softly. "Go lie down, buddy. You are retired now." The words hit Buster like a physical blow. "Go lie down!" That was the command for the end of the day, not the beginning. Buster refused to move. He stood his ground, letting out a soft, confused whine. He looked at the old, worn-out vest still hanging on the hook. It looked so empty. David stood up, holding the handle of Max's new harness. "It is okay, old boy. You have done enough. It is time for you to rest." David pointed toward the living room rug. With a heavy heart, Buster finally obeyed. He walked slowly to his dog bed near the window, feeling more exhausted than he ever had after a 10-mile walk. He lay down, resting his chin on his paws, and watched the scene unfold. David opened the front door, and the morning noise of the city rushed in. Max immediately pulled hard on the harness, eager to get outside. Buster winced. "You never pull the human," he thought angrily. "You must guide them smoothly." David stumbled slightly but quickly regained his balance, offering a firm command to the young dog. They stepped out onto the porch, and Buster let out a long, trembling sigh. His entire body wanted to jump up, push the door open, and take over. He watched them through the glass of the large window. The puppy was already making rookie mistakes. A squirrel ran across the fence, and Max turned his head sharply, almost leading David into a rosebush. Buster's muscles tightened. He stood up, whining loudly at the glass. He knew how dangerous the outside world was. If the guide was distracted, the human could get seriously hurt. Buster paced back and forth in front of the window. He remembered his own training. He had learned to ignore squirrels, other dogs, and even pieces of food dropped on the sidewalk. It had taken months of strict discipline to become a perfect service dog. Now, all that experience was locked inside a body that was getting too old to perform. He watched David gently pull Max back into position. The puppy sat down, looking confused, but eager to please. Buster realized with a painful twist in his stomach that the puppy was not a bad dog. He was just inexperienced. But in this job, a lack of experience could mean the difference between life and death. The city was full of unexpected obstacles, deep puddles, fast bicycles, and silent electric cars. Buster pressed his wet nose against the cold glass, leaving a foggy mark. He could not protect David from the living room. As his human and the young, foolish puppy disappeared down the street, Buster felt an overwhelming sense of uselessness. He looked back at his empty vest hanging on the hook. The house had never felt so quiet or so incredibly lonely. The hours passed slowly. Buster lay on his bed, listening to the ticking clock. Each second felt like an eternity. He missed the familiar rhythm of the city. He missed the smell of the bakery on the corner and the friendly greetings from the coffee shop owner. Most of all, he missed the connection he shared with David. When they walked together, they were one single entity. They communicated through slight movements of the harness handle. Now, that connection was broken. Buster felt like a ship lost at sea without an anchor. He closed his eyes, remembering his past walks. Suddenly, the sound of the front door opening woke him up. Buster lifted his head, his ears pointing forward. He expected to hear David's confident footsteps and Max's energetic panting. Instead, the door slammed shut violently. David was breathing heavily, and Max was whining in a high, frightened pitch. Buster pushed himself up, his stiff joints cracking loudly in the quiet room. He hurried toward the hallway as fast as his old legs could manage. What he saw made his heart race with anxiety. David was leaning against the wall, looking very pale, while the puppy trembled nervously beside him. Buster approached them slowly, sniffing the air. He smelled fear, harsh exhaust fumes, and cold sweat. Max's new vest was dirty, and the puppy looked completely overwhelmed. David sank to the floor, wrapping his arms around his knees. He buried his face in his hands, sighing deeply. Buster did not hesitate. He walked over and gently pressed his large, comforting head against David's chest. He offered a low, soothing grumble in his throat. David reached out blindly, his fingers finding Buster's soft fur. "Oh, Buster," David whispered, his voice shaking slightly. "We had a very terrible time out there today." "Max got scared by a loud construction truck," David continued, stroking Buster's back. "He tried to run into the busy street, and I almost lost the handle. We barely made it back home safely." Buster looked at the young golden retriever. Max was hiding under the hallway table, looking miserable and completely exhausted. The puppy's tail was tucked firmly between his legs. Buster felt a sudden shift in his emotions. The anger and jealousy he had felt earlier began to quickly fade. He realized that Max was not trying to steal his job. The puppy was just extremely frightened now. Buster walked over to the small table where Max was hiding. He lowered his large head and gave the puppy's ear a gentle lick. Max looked up, his big brown eyes filled with deep uncertainty. He let out a soft whine, seeking comfort. Buster lay down next to him, letting the young dog press against his warm side. He wanted to tell Max that it was going to be okay. He wanted to explain that the loud noises and fast machines were terrifying at first, but they could be mastered eventually. The city was wild, but guides were strong, always. David listened to the calm interaction between the two dogs. A weak smile appeared on his face. "You are a good boy, Buster," he said softly. "You have always been so incredibly patient." David slowly stood up, using the wall for strong support. He walked to the kitchen to get some water, leaving the dogs in the hallway. Buster knew exactly what he had to do next. He could no longer be David's eyes on the busy streets, but he still had a crucial role to play here. The young puppy desperately needed an experienced, patient teacher to guide him. The next morning, the strict routine started again. The bright sunlight warmed the floor, and David emerged from the bathroom. He reached for the new harness, and Max immediately began to jump around with pure excitement. Buster did not stay on his bed this time. He walked firmly to the front door and sat next to the metal hook. When Max bounced over, Buster gave him a stern look and a low growl. He demanded absolute focus. The puppy immediately stopped jumping and sat down properly, carefully imitating the older dog's perfectly calm posture. David noticed the quiet change immediately. "Thank you, Buster," David said, carefully securing the harness on the quiet puppy. As David opened the door, Buster nudged Max gently towards the exit, acting like a wise supervisor. He watched them step out onto the front porch. This time, Max did not pull eagerly. He walked steadily beside David, remembering the calm example his mentor had just shown him. Buster stood by the glass window, proudly watching them walk down the busy street. The squirrel ran across the fence again, but Max only glanced at it briefly before quickly looking back at David. The puppy was finally concentrating. Over the next few weeks, a beautiful new dynamic developed inside the house. Buster became the unofficial trainer. Whenever David practiced basic commands in the living room, Buster demonstrated the perfect response. If Max tried to play with the harness, Buster quickly corrected him with a sharp bark. The puppy entirely worshipped the older dog, following him everywhere and precisely copying his every move. Buster realized that his life purpose had not disappeared. It had simply evolved. He was no longer the active soldier on the front lines, but he was the general guiding the new recruit to ultimate victory. One evening, after a long, successful walk, David took off Max's harness. The young dog immediately ran over to Buster, gently licking his muzzle in a sign of deep respect. Buster accepted the greeting calmly. He looked up at the wall. His old worn-out vest was still hanging safely on the hook right next to Max's new equipment. It no longer looked sad or empty to him anymore. Instead, it looked exactly like a beautiful badge of honor, a timeless symbol of a job well done. Buster rested his head on his paws, finally feeling completely at perfect peace inside. He closed his eyes and let out a deep, contented sigh. The legacy of his incredible service was secure, and his beloved human was going to be perfectly safe forever now. The end. That was quite a journey for Buster, wasn't it? It is never easy to step back from something you love, especially when it feels like your entire identity. I hope you enjoyed this story of loyalty, transition, and finding a new purpose. Key vocabulary. Now, to help you get the most out of this story, let's look at some of the more challenging vocabulary and phrases we used. I will break them down so you can use them confidently in your own English conversations. Hesitate. He opened his eyes, but a familiar dull pain in his hips made him hesitate. To hesitate means to pause before doing something, usually because you are unsure, nervous, or in pain. You might hesitate before jumping into a cold pool, or hesitate before answering a difficult question. Unfamiliar. There was an unfamiliar scent in the air. If something is unfamiliar, it means you do not recognize it or you have no experience with it. It is the opposite of familiar. You might hear an unfamiliar song on the radio or walk down an unfamiliar street. Unaware. Max backed away, wagging his tail happily, completely unaware of the serious situation. To be unaware means to not know or not notice what is happening around you. You can be unaware of the time when you are having fun, just like Max was unaware of Buster's bad mood. Secured. David knelt down and carefully secured the new vest around Max's chest. To secure something means to fasten or tie it firmly so it will not become loose or get lost. You secure your seatbelt in a car or secure a lock on a door. Eager. Max immediately pulled hard on the harness, eager to get outside. When you are eager, you are very excited and enthusiastic about doing something. An eager student is always ready to learn, and an eager puppy is always ready for a walk. Crucial. He could no longer be David's eyes on the busy streets, but he still had a crucial role to play here. If something is crucial, it is extremely important or necessary for success. Water is crucial for survival, and studying is crucial for passing an exam. Legacy. The legacy of his incredible service was secure. A legacy is something valuable that you leave behind after you are gone, like money, property, or in Buster's case, a history of excellent work and a well-trained successor. It is how people will remember you. Key phrases. Fighting the stiffness. Buster took a deep breath, fighting the stiffness in his joints. This phrase means trying hard to overcome the physical feeling of muscles or joints that are difficult to bend or move. Older animals and humans often fight the stiffness when they wake up in the morning. Symbol of his duty. That was where his leather harness hung, the symbol of his duty. A symbol is an object that represents an idea. A symbol of duty represents the responsibility and work someone is trusted to do. A police officer's badge or a doctor's white coat are also symbols of duty. Heart sank. Buster's heart sank. This is a common idiom we use when we suddenly feel very disappointed, sad, or discouraged. If you study hard but still fail a test, you might say your heart sank when you saw the grade. Stood his ground. He stood his ground, letting out a soft, confused whine. To stand your ground means to refuse to move or to refuse to change your opinion, especially in a difficult situation. Buster refused to move from the hallway because he believed he should go to work. Lost at sea. Buster felt like a ship lost at sea without an anchor. This is an idiom that means feeling completely confused, without direction, or not knowing what to do next. When Buster lost his job, he felt lost at sea because he lost his sense of direction in life. Take over. His entire body wanted to jump up, push the door open, and take over. To take over means to take control of something or assume responsibility for a task from someone else. If your friend is tired of driving, you might take over the driving for them. Front lines. He was no longer the active soldier on the front lines. The front lines literally refer to the area in a war where the actual fighting happens. We use it metaphorically to describe the most important, active, or visible part of any difficult job or situation. Badge of honor. Instead, it looked exactly like a beautiful badge of honor, a timeless symbol of a job well done. A badge of honor is a mark of pride. It is something you wear or display that shows you have achieved something difficult or brave. Buster's old worn-out vest proved how hard he had worked. Comprehension quiz. Now that we have reviewed those challenging words and phrases, let's test how well you understood Buster's story. I am going to ask you 3 quick comprehension questions. I want you to listen to all 3 questions and then pause the video. Take a moment to think about your answers and write them down in the comments section below. Do not worry about being perfectly correct. This is just for practice. After you comment, press play and I will reveal the correct answers in just a moment. Ready? Here are the questions. First, what specific object hanging by the door represents Buster's identity and past job? Next, why does Buster's attitude toward the new puppy Max suddenly change from jealousy to sympathy in the second part of the story? Finally, what new purpose or job does Buster eventually find for himself by the end of the story? Go ahead and pause the video right now. Think about the story. Type your answers in the comments below and then come right back. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. For the first question, the object that represents Buster's identity is his old, heavy leather harness that hangs on the metal hook in the hallway. For the second question, Buster's attitude changes because David and Max return from a walk completely terrified. Buster realizes Max is not trying to steal his job out of malice. The puppy is just inexperienced and frightened by the loud, busy city, so Buster decides to comfort him. And for the final question, Buster's new purpose is becoming the unofficial trainer and mentor. He guides the young puppy, teaching him how to behave, how to focus, and how to eventually become a perfect service dog. How many did you get right? Let me know. If you enjoyed this story and found the vocabulary breakdown helpful, please hit that like button. It really helps out. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our future English learning stories. Thank you so much for watching and keep practicing.